how you doing? Is I the Terrorific Lady, otherwise known as Brandy, and welcome to Retro Horror School and the happiest of Fridays to you. And guess what time it is? It is time for another franchise ranking. The last one I did was a couple months back, where I ranked the whole of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and today I am ranking the whole of the Omen franchise. The Omen centers around the central character of Damien Thorn, whether directly or indirectly, depending on the movie. And who is Damien Thorn? He is the Antichrist. So a little bit about the background of the Antichrist from a purely educational perspective. There is a belief that there is one central Antichrist and then other just kinds of antichrists or false prophets. So Damien Thorn is considered just like the Antichrist. If you're looking to study things from a purely educational perspective, you will find mentions of the Antichrist in the Revelation to John or Revelations, the first two epistles of John, and the second letter of Paul to the Thessalonians. But the Antichrist is a beast who comes from the sea or from the abyss. He falls to the earth and is given the key to the bottomless pit. He is the son of perdition. He is a mass deceiver and a great deceiver, and he will claim to be just like an all-powerful being. He will claim to be basically God and the number one just supreme ruler, I guess, ever of Earth, until he is defeated and is passed out for forever. This is the gold standard for studying things like this. The main mention of Antichrist from an educational perspective you will find in the Revelation to John, Revelations chapter 13, verses 1 through 8 is where he is the most prominent. So that is a bit of the background on the Antichrist himself, which Damien Thorn is. There are 6 total films in the Omen franchise. Definitely not as many as the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, but still a very established franchise. I will be ranking the movies to what I feel is subjectively the worst to what is subjectively the best. I will try to be as objective as I can. I'm going to be talking about things like storyline, special effects, visual effects, the characters, and the impact the overall story has. Again, my opinion is not the end all be all, and my rankings are not the end all be all of rankings for this particular franchise. If you'd agree or disagree with my rankings, that is absolutely perfectly copacetic. Also, a brief plug, if you want to say in what kinds of franchise rankings that I do, and if you want to vote on the kinds of franchise rankings that I do, go check out my Ko-fi. All right, so let's dive right in to the Omen franchise ranking. Omen 4, The Awakening, it's meant to be set right after Omen 3, The Final Conflict. Damien apparently has a daughter, and the Antichrist evil has been passed on through her. And that's basically the gist of this entire movie. It was released in a few theaters, I believe, in the UK and Canada, and it was mainly released on TV here in the United States. So they were looking for this movie to be kind of the reboot and the restart of the Omen franchise, and it got such a poor reception that did not happen. And what I felt just about this movie is that it was, granted, I mean, what can you really do with an Antichrist type character? I mean, they're the Antichrist, they're going to eventually take over and rule the world. You can tell they tried to change it up by having the Antichrist be a girl. So Damien's daughter is this. And a lot of the storyline is the same as you would find in really any of the Omen movies. She was adopted into this family, and a bunch of weird stuff starts happening around her. But it was really hard to take seriously because it was very goofy. Overall, the tone was goofy, the music was goofy, and didn't fit with a lot of the seriousness that they were trying to portray. And what doesn't really make sense to me is the fact that why the Antichrist type character, why would they be so turned off by psychics and crystals? To me, they would be more turned off, by religious iconography, churches and crosses, kind of like vampires are. I just thought that was strange. There wasn't really going on a lot in the way of special effects either. And the story really overall didn't have that much of an impact. It's easily forgettable. I didn't even know that there was a fourth one. I thought it ended with the final conflict until they did the remake, which came in 2006. So, yeah, if a horror movie is easily forgettable, or I didn't even really know it existed, then yeah, that's why it's smack dab at the bottom of this list for me at number 6. Omen 3, the final conflict. In this movie, you have Damien Thorne, who is all grown up. I think they said that he was 31, or maybe I'm imagining that he's 31, but you could tell that he's older now. The CEO of Thorne Industries, and coming into his own and ready to become the Antichrist that he was born to be. Basically, as a side note, he's only allowed to be the Antichrist that he's born to be if you're looking at it from Revelations for 42 months or 3.5 years. So he's going to have 3.5 years to wreak havoc and chaos on the whole of the world. A lot of this movie, the script was slow paced, and it was kind of boring. The greatest sense of urgency in this entire film occurred maybe about 40 minutes in, when Damien heard about the fact that the Nazarene was going to be born. And he was like, well, oh crap, I gotta kill all of those babies that was born on whatever date it was. Was it March 6th? I think it was something like that, between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. So that was the greatest sense of urgency that took place throughout the entire movie. And then this movie ignored a lot of the lore that was established, especially in the first one. There are these daggers that are very important to killing the Antichrist. You have to get him on hollow ground. It's step 1 dagger in the center that gets rid of the physical life force, and then the 6 others, you have to put them at different points in the body to make them all in the shape of a cross that gets rid of the spiritual life force. Or maybe it's the other way around. But anyway, now I guess you don't need to get Damien on hollow ground, and you don't need to use all 7 daggers. Apparently, you only need to use 1. They ignored that part of the lore. And the timeline is all askew. So if they're saying that the first one took place in the 70s, and you can greatly tell because of the clothes and everything that people's wearing that it was set in the 70s, then in this one he's 31, and the movie came out in 1981. So unless he's got some kind of demonic powers to where he can rapidly transform an age, the timeline is very off, and I'm not the best at math, but something does not compute here. Also, you could tell that it tries to be kind of philosophical and kind of thinker, especially with Sam Neill's monologue whenever he is talking to his cult, and also talking to the Jesus statue wherever it was. It tries to be philosophical, and it fails, because by that point, when the action like finally kind of starts to happen, I sort of checked out. And to me, not even Sam Neill could have made this script better. And I was really looking forward to this because I love Sam Neill, but the slow pace of this movie, dealing with the fact that they ignored just all of the lore of the Omen and an skewed timeline, puts this movie one step above the Omen 4. Again, Sam Neill was the best part of it. Now we got the remake, which was released on June 6th, 2006. 666. Get it? Ha ha ha. Very clever marketing. If you know the story of the Omen, then yeah, pretty much got it. It's the Antichrist was born, was adopted by a United States ambassador and his wife, the Thorns. Damien gets to a certain age, stuff starts happening, things start feeling off, and then it's found out that he is the Antichrist and must be destroyed. So basically, yes, that is the Omen. Now, the remake is very early 2000s in style, especially with the credits. Movies shot in 2000s tend to have very like stylistic credits that would show shots of particular events or things like flash, 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 flashing by. The best example, another example too I can think of, are the Dawn of the Dead remake credits from 2004. The early 2000s seemed to be an era for a lot of remakes now that I think about it. I did like the beginning, the opening scene where the priests were all meeting with what I assume is the Pope, and they were saying that here's all these natural disasters and things that have happened, and here's how they connect with the prophecies in Revelation. The first trumpet blew, and the second trumpet blew, and the third one, the fourth, and the fifth, and sixth. And this is the stuff that happened. I did like how they connected that, the disasters that happened, with what was mentioned in Revelation. Boris Suffers is basically a shot-for-shot remake of the original Omen. Even the dialogue is pretty much the same. That's where the Nightmare on Elm Street remake also suffered, is that it's basically a shot-for-shot remake of the original film. No, things like when Damien saw the dog at his birthday party, and it was an all-black German Shepherd, which was gorgeous, by the way. And then it's like they remembered, oh crap, this used to be a Rottweiler. So suddenly the dog was a Rottweiler. Later on, you didn't think we would notice, we did. And the kills in the movie definitely look better, like the decapitation and then the priest dying. Well, it's because it's 2006 and they're able to do more stylistic things with the kills. But they telegraph things happening way too much. I felt the tension wasn't really there. And maybe it's because I've seen The Omen and I know it's going to happen, but even then, the tension was not really there. Also, kind of coupled with the fact that it had the typical trope of the wife thinks something is happening, the husband's like, oh, you're crazy, everything's fine. Like, I hate that trope in horror and it needs to stop. But that is a whole other side rant. I liked it better than The Omen Part 3, and I liked it better than definitely than The Omen Part 4. It wasn't the greatest, but it wasn't terrible. The Omen 2, you have Damien, who is either 12 or 13, I'm not sure. He is in the military academy. He was adopted by his uncle, who was the president of the United States, but I guess he's not anymore, and he is running Thorn Industries. And I guess Damien doesn't know he's the Antichrist, or he forgot he's the Antichrist. I have no idea, but he's got these mentors who are popping up and reminding him or just telling him this is who you're going to become, and we are here to help you. So this is basically Damien kind of finding out about who he is and or who he's going to become. And it's like, okay. I mean, there's not really any moment of, are you kidding me? What the heck? And he just finds out and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. So I guess I'm going to become the Antichrist. The second one was definitely not scary. It was goofy, like The Omen 4, but it was at least entertaining because there was a direct connection to the first one by the fact that it almost directly followed the first one. And they even got an actor who looked like he could have been Damien, but about 6 or 7 years older. The deaths in the movie were very over exaggerated. And I found that funny. But the one thing I found is that it was kind of lacking in character development, especially when it came to the mentors that were supposed to be surrounding Damien. One of them, one who works in Thorn Industries, was a little bit more well developed because you saw him more. You saw him with Damien's uncle more. He would make it a special point to talk to Damien. But Lance Henriksen plays the other mentor, and he is a sergeant. And all of a sudden, it's just like, hey, he's here at this military academy. And he's like, oh, hey, Damien, you're going to become the Antichrist, wink, wink. There's really, no development there. And it's Lance freaking Henriksen. When you have him in a movie, do something with him. Please. I am begging you. Like I said, I was thoroughly entertained. I wasn't bored. The hour and a half of this movie flew by as compared to the third one, which was about the same amount of time, and I felt like it was over 2 hours. So, no complaints. Had a good time with it, which is why it is in the number 3 spot. Now, it wouldn't be a fair overview of the Omen franchise without including the prequel, which just came out recently, a couple months ago, called The First Omen. So it is set, I don't know how long before the events of The First Omen, because it is a prequel, but it is about this nun named Margaret who is brought from America to Rome to this church. She's an initiate, and this is before she is taking her final vows. And while she is there, she uncovers this conspiracy to bring about the birth of evil incarnate, or the birth of the Antichrist. She finds out that the church and the people that she thought she loved and trusted are a part of trying to bring the Antichrist to life to help bring people back to the church. So people who are turning away from faith and religion, so they think like birthing the Antichrist will bring the naysayers or bring people who are turned to secularism back. I can never pronounce that word correctly. Secularism. There we go. This movie was directed by Kasha Stevenson, and she directed something on Netflix. I believe that is called Brand New Cherry Flavor. But this is the first major studio movie that she has directed, and I have to commend her for this. It is very beautifully shot. You can tell that a lot of attention and care was paid to make sure that this film plausibly looked like it could take place before The Omen. It looked like I was watching a film shot in the 70s, just from the overall way the camera looked and the tone of the film. It was really nice. And of course, there were some throwbacks or nods to the first Omen without being too much in your face, like, well, this is an Easter egg, and that is an Easter egg, and that is an Easter egg. For instance, there's a throwback to when the nanny hung herself in the first one by saying, "It's all for you, Damien, it's all for you." Oh, there is a nun, like an initiate, who does the exact same thing, except she sets herself on fire and then flings herself off a building and hangs herself. I also like how this movie brought in the historical context about the war between secularism and religion in the 70s, because that was a big point of contention. I also like that they touched on historically about the war between secularism and religion that was taking place in the 70s. In my video about 70s horror tropes, I do mention that this was heavily used in 70s movies about religious horror and pushing back against what people saw as oppressive institutions. Well, a lot of what was going on in the 70s were these two sides were clashing against one another. And you had the secularists who was like, no, we don't want to be a part of this oppressive institution anymore. And then you had the religious people on the other side saying, no, no, come back. Like, so that kind of war and the butting of heads was going on a lot during the 70s. But I really like that they brought that in there, because that was going on with a lot of the movies set in Rome. So there were a lot of protests around that going on around that time. A lot of riots, a lot of protests against not just the church as a symbol of authority, but just against authority in general. It was also a big fear in the 70s about secularism ruining faith. So love that they touched on that. There were also little nods to other horror movies, like one I saw in particular, a big nod to Possession, a movie that came out in 1981, which coincidentally also starred Sam Neill. I don't want to spoil it, but if you've watched Possession and you've watched the prequel, then you know the part that I'm talking about. And without spoiling it, and I will give you a hint, it happens immediately after a car crash in the prequel. That's all I'll say. There was also some retconning of the lore that was established in the Omen. For instance, it was made very clear that a jackal was Damien's mother, but here it was Margaret that ended up being Damien's mother. So almost kind of like a Rosemary babies thing. But I guess you could make the argument that if the jackal was Damien's father, then the bones that they found in the grave, in that graveyard in the first Omen, was that of Damien's father, and they were trying to just pass it off as the mother to kind of fit with the whole prophecy thing that was going on there. The jackal thing would be going off of the very medieval view that the Antichrist had to be conceived through just really weird, evil means. That was retcon. The fact that the jackal is the father instead of the mother. Also, a big thing is you have the cult and the people that were doing the Antichrist bidding as having the marks of 666. They already knew the Antichrist was going to be born. They were a part of it. They wanted this to happen, except for Father Brennan, who was trying to atone by telling Damien's father that your son's the Antichrist. You're going to have to end up doing something about it. Whereas in this one, this cult was still Catholic. They were just kind of in extreme form of Catholicism that wanted to birth the Antichrist to give people something to fear and bring them back to the church. That was a little retconned, unless this extreme like Catholic cult evolved into the cult that you saw in the first one, which I don't know. That was another thing that was kind of retconned. from the original lore. But in spite of the things that were retconned from the original lore, it definitely did not take away from my enjoyment of the overall movie. I was thinking this is the way that a prequel should be done. It took things that people may have had questions about from the original movie. It answered them. It did the movie in its own way. And it didn't try to overly just rehash things or beat people over the head with Easter eggs. So that is why the prequel is in the number 2 spot. And now we have the OG Omen, which I won't go into much detail about the plot because I already talked about it whenever I was talking about the remake. Damien's the Antichrist. His parents find out weird stuff is going on, and they have to stop it, or try to anyway. I thought The Omen was just so beautifully done. My bias aside, and me being that I'm a big fan of 70s horror films, I thought it was so beautifully done. It had very realistic tension. You believed the struggle of the parents, like when all this stuff is happening with their son. And like, well, like, am I going crazy? Like, is this actually happening? Should I be feeling this way? I mean, what's going on? And then when the father finds out the truth about his son, and Father Brennan, and then later on the archaeologist, I think he is, Bugenhagen, tells him, look, he's the Antichrist and he's got the symbol of the beast on him, and you're gonna have to kill him. And the father's like, no, this is crazy. Look, he's a kid. I'm not going to do this. And any normal sane person would think that. And especially this is his son. This is who he thought was his son. This is a child that he raised and that he loves. And he's going to have these doubts and these thoughts. I thought that was beautifully handled, the tension and the doubt behind like all this. I mean, it is a really kind of crazy situation. Beautifully acted by Gregory Peck and Lee Remick. Just chef's kiss there. They did a great job of portraying the doubt and the tension that these two parents were feeling. The story was very well paced. The tension kept you on the edge of your seat. And the ending was perfect because even if they had ended with the first Omen and they never made another one ever again, that ending has kind of left you knowing what was going to happen. Because Damien ended up being adopted by his uncle, who was the president of the United States. And the little kid looks into the camera and gives this very just evil smile. Oh my God, that kid was very creepy and convincing as Damien. Ugh, give me the willies. Oh, that is why the original Omen, everything combined, makes it my number 1 in this franchise. And there you have it, everybody. There is my franchise ranking of all the Omen movies, including the prequel. So what I would like to know from you is, how would you rank all the movies in the Omen franchise if you've seen them all? If you haven't seen them all and have only seen a few, what is your favorite of the Omen movies that you have seen? You can catch all of the Omen movies in the franchise, including the prequel, on Hulu. I don't know how long they're going to be there, so watch them before they're gone. Thank you for going through this franchise ranking of the Omen with me. Then class is dismissed, everybody. But I will see you next time. Bye.